Special education would not be possible without additional professional support. Mike will now tell us about applied behavior analysis. Okay, now we're going to talk about incorporating behavior analysis into your classroom with BCBA, Michael McKay. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Thanks, Chris.
So, yeah, I've just got some questions for you.
Sure.
First of all, what the heck is behavior?
Well, I'll get into that in a little bit. First, I'd like you to try and attempt to make a list, take a couple minutes, and write a list of all the behaviors that your students do in your classroom. And then after the 2 minutes, attempt to write a definition of what the word behavior means. So what did you come up with?
Okay, well, I've got a student in one of my classes who he rocks. I have another who twitches.
Sure.
Of course, non-compliance, because you just don't do what you ask them to.
Of course.
A lot of students just can't stay in their seats. And the impulsive hand raiser.
Okay.
And the occasional nose picker that you come across in class.
So those are all pretty common for what BCBAs see. But basically, what behavior is, it's any action that an individual does. It's anything an organism does. It's a neutral word. So all the things you listed could be perceived as bad in connotation. Some others I provided were crying, tantruming, throwing objects, biting nails. Behavior can be positive. It can be a good thing. Such good behaviors include writing an essay, or saying hello, shaking hands, or even exercising.
Okay. What else can behavior do?
Well, in looking at the field of behavior analysis, we're big into our definitions. The wordier, the better. The reason why is if a behavior can be defined, it means it can be changed, it can be seen, it can be measured. So looking at how we define behavior, there are 3 key elements really. What does the person do, or what does it look like? What setting, or where is this behavior happening? And what does the behavior not look like? So a non-example.
Okay. Could you give me some examples of some of these behaviors?
Sure. Looking at particularly defining a behavior, we'll take behavior aggression. It's pretty common, but aggression can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different kids or different situations. As a result, there are multiple ways to define it, so being specific is key. So in the slide I provided an incomplete definition. Aggression is any instance when someone hurts someone. So while that may be true, and we can infer what that means, it's not exactly crystal clear what we're observing. It leaves us hanging. How? When? Where? And how? And what is this person doing to hurt somebody else? And then how do you measure pain in terms of tracking? So a more complete definition of what aggression is would be any instance when the student hits with an open. Okay. A more complete definition is any instance when the student hits with an open or closed hand or fist, kicks, bites, scratches, spits, or uses an object to do any of these acts. Usually, the behavior occurs in the classroom. An example of the behavior would be when the teacher asks the student to write his name on the top of the paper, and the student hits the teacher with an open fist. A non-example of this behavior would be when the student is trying to get the teacher's attention, and he taps her on the shoulder lightly, like this.
There are some principles of behavior. What are those?
Okay, so behavior analysis is very rooted in structure, and there are key principles that the field accepts as the main core points in how to analyze behavior and how to ultimately change it. The 4 are reinforcement, punishment, extinction, and stimulus control. So, I have a challenge for you. Turn with a partner or small group and try to define what these words mean or anything you know about the terms. No wrong answers, just take an attempt to try and see what you think these words mean. Again, reinforcement, punishment, extinction, and stimulus control.
Go.
All right.
So Mike, what do those words mean?
Well, I'll give you some textbook definitions. So reinforcement is a stimulus change resulting in the presentation or removal of a stimulus, which will result in the increase in the probability of that behavior occurring in the future. Punishment is a stimulus change resulting in the presentation or removal of a stimulus, which results in a decrease in the probability of that behavior occurring in the future. Extinction is a stimulus change resulting in the withholding of reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior, resulting in a decrease in the probability of that behavior occurring in the future. And finally, stimulus control is a term that refers to the behavioral control of antecedent conditions, which is said to be demonstrated when a behavior is emitted in the presence of one stimulus and not in the presence of another. What? In other words, reinforcement is when you either give something, which is called positive reinforcement, or you remove a non-preferred, negative reinforcement, which results in the behavior more likely to happen again. And important to note, thinking of positive and negative, think math. So positive, we're giving something, we're adding something to the environment, such as something as simple as an M&M or a sticker or something really cool. Where negative refers to removing something or subtracting, such as you don't have to do this homework assignment or any of that type of stuff. So don't think good, bad, think plus, minus. So an example, so say you have a student and she does her math problem correctly, and you give her a sticker, and say, great job, keep up the good work. And she gets the problem correct. Next class. That scenario right there was an example of positive reinforcement. When the student completes a math problem correctly, and you tell her, you're good, you don't need to finish the sheet. That's an example of negative reinforcement because she's likely to get that problem again correct in the next class. So let's talk about punishment. Punishment is the same idea, but the opposite. So you can either give something, which is positive punishment, or remove a preferred item, which is negative punishment. So the behavior is less likely to happen again. So take the kid that calls out from her class. The teacher would give her a detention slip and extra homework. Thus, she's probably not going to yell anymore in that class, or over time, not going to yell anymore. That's an example of positive punishment. When a student taking the same kid who yells in class, and that teacher takes away recess time for calling out, that would result in her also not yelling in class anymore, hopefully, which is an example of negative punishment. All right. So you looked at me like, extinction, dinosaurs, what? No. Nothing to do with dinosaurs. Extinction means when something was reinforced, and basically that means when the student was getting what they want all the time, and then all of a sudden, they're not getting what they want. This results in that behavior going away eventually. It takes time. So there's that classic expression, trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. Think of that when you think of extinction. So an example of extinction would be when you got to school today and the classroom door was locked. You tried to open the door, it didn't open. So what'd you do? You jiggled the handle more, tried to push the door with your elbow, or knock on the door, anything. Eventually, after about 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes, you realize that door is not opening because it's locked. And thus you stop trying to open the door, thus extinguishing your opening door behavior. And then finally, stimulus control. It just means that behavior is more likely to happen in the presence of one thing when compared to another. So like, you don't behave the same way in church as you do at a bar or a restaurant, do you? An example would be, when you were driving here today on the highway, you passed a state police officer. You hit the brake, right?
Yes.
Probably. To slow down, because you didn't want a ticket. But then, the next day, or yesterday, you drove here and there was no cop car there. You didn't need to hit the brake, and you can continue driving at your rate of speed a hair over the speed limit.
So, why do kids act the way they do? Why do these behaviors happen?
Well, everybody has an MO. In other words, behavior happens in order to gain access to something in the environment. There are what we call functions of behavior, attempting to answer the question why. And the 4 widely accepted ones from the behavioral community are attention seeking. So if I do this behavior, that person's going to look at me or give me attention in some way. Escape avoidance is another function, which means if I do X behavior, then I'm going to get out of doing the dumb task that you gave me. Access to tangible. That just means that if I do this behavior, I get this awesome thing that I really want. And then the last one is sensory automatic. If I do this behavior, it feels good to me internally.
Okay. All right, Mike. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us about applied behavior analysis.
Sure.
It's been very nice talking to you.
No problem, Chris. Thanks.